got statutes that you had asked me about that I mentioned in my arguments. Subchapter D of Chapter 143.
All right.
Behind it is an Attorney General's opinion on that issue.
Which was it?
When I was talking about what constitutes a disciplinary action under 143.
Oh, this is the reprimand, whether it's a discipline or not.
That's right.
But, I mean, it's still consistent with the 143 law, but, I mean, here in McAllen, it's not the same.
Well, yeah, the question was what the statute had to say about it. The hearing examiner asked me to provide the statutes I was referring to in my argument, so that's what those are.
Okay.
We're still off the record. Refresh my memory. Were there any provisions of the collective
On page, I think it's 15. Let me make sure.
You're looking at the civil service.
Yeah, the contract, disciplinary suspensions, Article 24, page 15.
All right.
Just basically, disciplinary suspensions and appeals shall be governed by the current applicable section of 143. Local government code. And the only thing other than that I could find in there was you have to subpoena the witness 10 days before the hearing. Otherwise, I mean, it didn't say why, what happens. Just said you must subpoena the witness 10 days before the hearing.
Well, that could mean a couple of things. It could mean that the witness can't be disposed, or if they are disposed, it can't be used, or it could mean that they're not obligated to do so, but they could waive it. It could mean either of those two things.
We could take it a step further. You know, it says if they don't subpoena them within 10 days, they can't call them as a witness. But argue that point. But
You know, this is an evidentiary point that doesn't mean anything because the testimony's already in. Nothing I'm going to do is going to affect the testimony. It's not going to have any weight. You know, I'm going to overrule the objection because the civil service rules say they do not apply. I do not feel comfortable in crafting my own rules under the provision that you can do anything you want to as long as it leads to a fair hearing.
May I respectfully
Yeah, sure.
add to that? And can we get this on the record?
We can. Let's go back on the record. Let me rule on the record, okay? The question has to do with the issue of whether or not the deposition taken Friday of this witness is admissible. The Association of the Appellant contends that it is not because it does not comply with Rule 199, correct?
That's
199 of the Texas Civil Service Rules. It seems to me that the issue before me is whether 199 is applicable to these proceedings. As both you know, some contracts provide that the rules of evidence, for example, San Antonio firefighters, for example, provides that the rules of evidence shall apply, and I believe Civil Service Commission rules will apply. Some contracts, some collective bargaining contracts expressly provide that the rules of evidence and the rules of civil procedure are applicable to these proceedings. This contract does not do so. As I understand the law, a hearing examiner is bound by the rules of the commission unless there is a provision in the collective bargaining contract that expressly states that if there's a conflict between the collective bargaining contract and the rules of the commission or statutes, then the contract governs. It's in the Texas bargaining law. And so because of that, because the rules of the commission expressly provide that the civil procedure rules do not apply, then I think I have to admit, go ahead.
Now, before you do that, Mr. Arbitrator, respectfully, if you will look at the civil service rules, which I agree, some contracts do supersede civil service rules, but beginning at the bottom of page 14, in section 10.02, under procedure before the commission, it's on page 14, very bottom, the Texas rules and civil procedure and the Texas rules of evidence shall not apply. However, and this was the page that we didn't have earlier following, the proceedings shall adhere to fundamental considerations of due process, and we submit to you that notice is a fundamental consideration of due process. And then to couple that, at the very bottom of page 15, section 12.02, it says the commission, and you stand in the stead of the commission here, may review the local rules as necessary and consider any amendments or changes at any time. To the extent allowed by law, the commission at any hearing may waive any part of these rules and regulations or make amendments ad hoc for particular proceedings or hearings in the interests of justice, necessity, and efficiency. And I submit to you, you more or less have already given Miranda warnings for whatever purpose that may have been to this witness. That in the interest of justice, we again renew our objection to any of her testimony coming in. I think earlier Mr. Rickman urged that her testimony be stricken, and that would include this deposition that was taken on Friday. But in the interest of justice to her, she may be perjuring herself in this testimony. And so you have the ability under 12.02, as it says here, you can make amendments ad hoc for this particular proceeding or hearing, and in the interest of justice and necessity. And I think clearly in the interest of justice, I mean, we have three inconsistent statements, and now arguably a fourth one from this witness, and she may very well have criminal exposure. And I don't know if she's spoken to an attorney or anything, but in the interest of justice, you could strike her testimony and strike that deposition, and then that's not an issue for her.
All right, I read the whole sentence. Starting with the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and Texas Rules of Evidence shall not apply. However, proceedings shall adhere to fundamental considerations of due process. How I interpreted that was this way. The specific governs over the general. Even if the general was applicable, it seems to me that one rule of construction is you go to the specific rather than the general. Just taking the last phrase, though, that leaves as many questions as it answers. What kind of due process? Are we talking about 14th Amendment due process? If we are, you very well know that the courts have not extended all the due process rights contained in the Bill of Rights to appellants in these cases. For example, as far as I know, the right of self-incrimination does not apply. As a matter of fact, the case of Garrity suggests or implies that it's not applicable. And so I guess we have to talk about what due process rights we're talking about. I don't see any that I'm familiar with, and there may be some. I don't see any due process rights, if we're talking about 14th Amendment due process, that I'm familiar with that are applicable. Do you?
Well, I think a procedural due process, we're entitled to notice of a deposition. I'm not talking about substantive due process, I'm talking about procedural due process.
You're right about that. There are two prongs to due process under the 14th Amendment. One is procedural due process, one is substantive due process. Substantive due process requires that the rules that they have be followed and be fair, correct?
Correct.
All right. Procedural due process requires them to follow their own rules, correct?
Yes.
All right. The question is, what rule are they not following? The answer is, you're suggesting it's 199, and the rules of the commission expressly state that they're not applicable.
Except to the extent that you can make amendments in a hearing.
Well, I didn't read that a while ago. Yeah, you're talking about 12.
That's 12.02 at the bottom of that page, yes, sir.
The other question, and the question that's really important, it's not what I do with that, it's not, as I view it, it's not what I do with that, the written deposition. The question is what I do with the testimony that she offered here today. My question to you is this: how is what happened any different than you going out on Friday and talking to a witness, aside from the fact that it's taken down as a deposition? Isn't that really I don't want to ask a leading question. Is that like you going out without giving notice, talking to a witness, bringing that witness here to testify, and offering her testimony at the hearing?
Well, I think to the extent that that written deposition, at least in her mind, locks her in some way to her testimony here today. I mean, she's not an attorney, obviously, and I guess hasn't consulted an attorney over the weekend about any of this. But to the extent that that written deposition kind of locks her in to her testimony here, you know, that's a problem.
Well, I've got to make a determination, which I have not made, about the credibility that she has here. And so I can handle that part on credibility. And we're talking about things that may not, and I don't want to minimize the ruling. I understand it's important. But we're talking about things that may not be important, may not be relevant, except to the extent that it reflects on truthfulness in those statements. And so I made my ruling. I don't want to reverse it. Let's continue. Where are we?
I believe that we had left off where we had offered the activity log listing of 4.2, and that had been admitted, and we had offered her 2 IDCs under notebook 2 at 5.
Wait a minute. Let me get all that stuff in front of me. Go back. What was the first thing you said?
Under notebook 3, we had
Notebook 3.
offered the 12-308 activity log for Charlie 664, which is Officer Castaneda at the time.
Oh, you're talking about 4.2?
4.2 in notebook 3, yes.
Any objection to 4.2? That's the 12-308 activity log.
No objection. I thought those were already amended.
Yeah.
I think they are.
Okay.
I think they are.
And then number 5, the incident report of 9/28 from 12-308 is also admitted, correct?
I show it admitted.
I marked it down over there.
Okay,
Yeah, it's admitted.
okay. And then her 2 IDCs, notebook 2, the 12-708 IDC, and then the 12-1108
They're both
guarantee
admitted.
statement. And so the only issue was the sworn statement that she gave on.
And that has been made. That has been admitted.
That has been admitted,
Yeah.
okay. That's what I wasn't.
Has that been signed and
It's just a
notarized?
notary, a notary.
Doesn't she
It's
have
not
to
been
sign?
signed, it's just a notarized statement.
That doesn't have, contain her signature, though.
It
She
does,
didn't
we
sign
just
it?
got the original from the court reporter. She has not reviewed and signed and edited it. It's just got the notary seal on it.
Well, I'm gonna have to have that, I'm gonna have to have her sign it before I
Okay.
can admit it.
Well, I have it here.
Well, that's fine. I can't admit it right now. When you get it signed, bring it back to my attention.
Okay. Why don't you give that to her? It's the original.
What else?
And I think we had passed the witness.
Cross.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Castaneda, I'm John Curtis. We've met before, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, I represented you back in December, did I not?
Yes, sir.
And through, up to and through the time that you resigned from the department?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember, even after that, you called me a couple times when the chief wanted to speak to you? Do you remember calling me asking, do I have to do that now that I'm not an employee? Do you remember that?
Like what?
Well, do you remember calling me once or twice after you had resigned when the chief wanted to speak to you? Do you remember that?
Not really. I
Okay.
don't remember.
Let me ask you a few questions, and actually, I want to ask you kind of about your life from last Monday. Was it last Monday that Norma Delgado from Mr. Navarro's office contacted you?
No, sir. It was Wednesday or Thursday, I believe.
Okay, it wasn't Monday?
No. No, I hadn't spoken to anybody prior to getting subpoenaed.
Okay. When was the first time you were contacted by Mr. Navarro's office?
After I got the subpoena, and I got the subpoena on, I'm really not sure if it was Wednesday or Thursday, but it was one of those days.
Okay. I'm looking at your deposition that you gave Friday night, September 25th, and you remember that Mr. Navarro asked you several
Yes, sir.
questions. And on page 5, he says, and I believe that through Ms. Delgado, I had asked for an opportunity to meet with you and interview you prior to the hearing on Monday. Is that correct? And you answered correct. Okay? So are you telling us now you didn't speak to Ms. Delgado?
No, that's not what I'm telling you. You're probably reading this wrong. It's this interview prior to the hearing on Monday, which meant prior to the hearing today, had Ms. Delgado spoken to me, and yes, she had.
Okay, but I thought you just told us that you didn't speak to Ms. Delgado. Did I misunderstand you?
No, you asked me if she had contacted me on Monday, and I said no.
Okay.
It was either Wednesday or Thursday, after I got subpoenaed.
Okay. So you received the subpoena on Wednesday or Thursday?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and how did it come about that you were going to speak to Mr. Navarro on Friday? How did that get set up?
His secretary, Ms. Delgado, called me to see if it was possible to meet with Mr. Navarro. She didn't say I had to, she just said if I could, and I said that's fine.
Okay, and then before you talked to Mr. Navarro, you called the chief, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what did you say to the chief did you get to him on the phone?
Yes,
What'd you say to him?
I told him I wanted to talk to him regarding the hearing on Monday, and I would feel more comfortable if it was just him. When I showed up to talk to him, it was him and Ms. Delgado who were in the room.
Okay. Ms. Delgado was in the room with you and the chief,
Yes, sir.
okay? And what did you discuss with the chief?
I pretty much told him everything that's here, because after I spoke to the chief, that's when I spoke to the attorney, and this was documented.
Okay, did you tell the chief you were interested in continuing in law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you tell him that you had applications in at other departments?
No, I didn't tell him that. I told him I'm sure he knew, since most departments where you apply, they look at your references, where you worked, and they call to verify employment or whatnot.
Well, did you have that kind of a discussion with the chief? Did you tell him I've applied at other places, I want to clear my name or whatever so I can get hired on at one of these places? What did you tell him?
What I told him was, I'm sure you know I've already applied with other agencies. I feel like I've been struggling to get back into law enforcement, and I feel that what happened with McAllen PD as far as its incidents, it's what's keeping me from moving forward. And if I have to be completely honest about everything, that's what I'm gonna do. Whether I take the risk of not getting back into law enforcement, that's okay. I just wanna be honest.
Okay, and so you're working now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Where are you working?
Texas Health and Human Services.
Okay, and what do you do there?
I'm a caseworker.
Okay, in what section?
The food stamps department, it's food stamps, Medicaid, and TANF.
Okay. You mentioned a couple of departments that you've applied at FAR and Weslaco, is that right?
No, I didn't mention, I believe somebody did, but yes, I've applied. I previously applied FAR, Mission, Weslaco.
Okay, and did you talk to the chief about those specific departments on Friday?
Like I said, all I told them, I'm sure you've known I've applied with other agencies. That's all. I didn't say anything else.
Okay. Do you have any idea why the city has subpoenaed the chief of police from FAR and asked him to bring your application and your reference documents?
No, I didn't even know he was subpoenaed.
Now, you said you have a pending offer from Weslaco, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did the chief say anything to you in response to your statement that you'd like to continue in law enforcement?
What chief?
Chief Rodriguez.
No, he said he understood. That's what I want to do.
Did he say he could help you if you helped him with this testimony?
No, not in any way. All I said was, I just want to know to what extent this is going to affect me.
Well, didn't you already know that? I mean, it sounds like you're saying that you've been blackballed apparently by McAllen PD is preventing you from getting on somewhere else. Is that right?
Yes, sir. But as far as moving forward,
Okay, and so did you go into this meeting with the chief with the intention of changing your story so he could make good recommendations for you to these other departments?
not at all. Not at all. Like I said, all I wanted was to be honest about everything.
Okay, but you weren't honest with me back in December, were you?
No,
You
sir.
lied to me, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
You lied to Mario Garcia, the union president, didn't you?
Yes, sir, because of Sergeant De La Rosa.
And didn't you lie to Sergeant De La Rosa?
Sergeant De La Rosa was the one that lied regarding everything, and I went along with it.
Okay, so now it's real convenient. You can just dump everything on Sergeant De La Rosa, so you'll have this clean slate to go to West Dakota.
Like I said, sir, I'm just being honest about everything.
Now, you said that Sergeant De La Rosa made you uncomfortable, yet you didn't feel confident enough to talk to me or talk to Sergeant Mario Garcia about any of this.
So the time that I spoke to you in person, he was there. Sergeant De La Rosa was there, and so was Sergeant Garcia. And even if, yes, I could give you a call anytime, I just didn't feel comfortable.
All right, now I want to ask you about this story now about hitting the fire hydrant. You struck a fire hydrant when you did a U-turn. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was not in the previous IDCs, right?
No, sir.
Before we go any farther with that, you do understand you do understand this administrative investigative warning that if you found to have misled internal affairs, you could be subject to criminal prosecution.
Objection. I don't know that counsel is stating that correctly.
All right, well, let me
Basically-
read it to you. Your statement, this is tab 4, Bates stamp 29. Your statement, as well as any information or evidence which is gained through your statement, cannot be used against you in any criminal proceeding except that you may be subject to criminal prosecution for any false statement which you may make. Are you telling us today that this statement that you gave on December 11th was a false statement?
It was a statement I gave because of what Sergeant De La Rosa told me to say.
Ma'am, that was not my question. Was it a false statement?
Yes, sir, Sergeant De La Rosa made it up.
I didn't ask you that. I asked you, was it a
Yes,
false
sir.
statement? Why should the arbitrator believe you today when you just admitted you gave a false statement, at or near or close to the time of this accident?
He doesn't have to believe me, but he will see that I'm sure I'm not the only witness. I'm sure somebody else out there can testify or add to it. But I am being honest about everything. I know I may be giving up what I want the most.
In your IDC, you mentioned two other incidents that the chief wanted answers on. The Los Casadores incident, that's the paint transfer, and then also the whatever happened at Spirits. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, Sergeant De La Rosa didn't investigate both of those, did he?
No, sir.
Okay, who investigated the Spirits incident?
Sergeant, well, I advised Sergeant Arenas regarding
Okay.
that.
All right, and you say in your IDC about Sergeant Arenas, you say, quote, Sergeant Arenas observed no damage and stated no documentation was needed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then with the Los Casadores incident, this is in July of '08, you say, Sergeant De La Rosa observed no damage to my unit and stated no documentation was needed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then in the final paragraph you say, in both cases, I relied upon my supervisors, Sergeant De La Rosa and Sergeant Arenas, both very experienced supervisors who determined that these incidents did not constitute an, quote, accident, end quote, because there was no damage, much less any injury. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think that's consistent with what you said this morning, that you were surprised that later the department is coming after you for not reporting these because you relied upon your supervisors. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to talk about the fire hydrant down on South Main Street, okay? Is that where it happened?
In that area, yes.
Okay. And you said you did a U-turn when you saw a person that matched the description of the pregnant woman in distress or whatever it was, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as you turned, was there a curb there? Did you go up on a curb?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the car went up on a curb.
Well, I don't know if it went up. I just know that I gave the U-turn. It hit the fire hydrant that was on the side of the curb.
Okay. Does the push bumper go all the way out to the end of the regular bumper?
I believe it does.
It goes all the way across the front, covers the headlights and everything. Is that what you're telling us? If you know.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay. All right, so when you hit the fire hydrant, was there a loud sound? What happened? I mean, how'd you know you hit the fire hydrant?
Well, I felt it. And that's
Okay.
when I reversed and I parked.
Okay, and then what'd you do?
I got down to inspect the damage and I didn't see anything.
Okay, so you looked over the whole front of the car and you didn't see any damage?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was there any other officer out there?
I know there, De Leon, Officer De Leon,
Okay, he was present?
checked down, when I checked down with the lady.
Did he look at the car?
I don't know.
If he said he didn't see any damage, would that be correct?
I don't know. I mean, I can't say anything for him, but like I said, I didn't see the damage, and maybe if somebody looked at my unit and didn't see damage, it's because it wasn't obvious, or so I thought.
Okay, so if Officer De Leon said, and this is about 4:30 or so, right?
I don't remember the time, well, 16?
Okay, well, the timesheet's in there, about 4:28.
Yes, sir.
If he tells us that he didn't see any damage, who's correct, you or him?
He didn't inspect my unit. He walked past. That's the thing. I was the only one that looked at actually stared or looked to see if there was damage.
Okay. So it's your testimony that by 4:30, 4:28, 4:30, that damage had already occurred to the vehicle?
When I checked down with that pregnant woman, that's when it happened.
Now, in your deposition from last Friday on page 15, you say, and you said this morning, that when you were at Luby's, you didn't look at the damage. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
On page 15, you say, question, all right, at the Luby's, did you all spend any time, like around the car, looking at the damage to the push guard or talking about it? Do you recall? No, not that I remember either. And then this morning, you said you didn't look at the damage while at Luby's. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you seen the video, the security video from Luby's?
No, sir.
Okay. Alan, can we play that?
Has that been admitted already? The video is part of the IA file that was produced, so is it admitted? Is it stipulated?
Well, we have no objection to the video from Luby's, if that's what you mean.
It will be admitted.
Now, just for the sake of time, this video is going to show you guys going in and then eventually coming out. And after you go in, I may ask Mr. Ozunin to speed it up to the point where you come out, if you think you can do that.
Well, yeah, I can, I mean,
Yeah.
if you tell me a time index, I can.
Yeah, once they go in, if you can advance it,
Can she see?
can you see okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, ready?
Yeah. Ellen, at the point her car pulls up, will you stop it and let me ask her if that's her car?
Yes.
Stop.
Okay. Is that you pulling up?
I
Oh,
guess.
Okay, go ahead, Alan, and we'll see. When you see yourself, tell us.
Okay.
Let me do this.
Okay, Alan, can you back it up to a couple shots? Just so she can identify the two of them.
I missed. Okay, there's, you want me to keep going?
Okay, go, you can go. Okay,
Stop.
stop right there. Is that you and Sergeant De La Rosa?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And you go on inside from here. Now, can you advance it till they come out?
Yeah,
It's about. I think it's about 8:10.
I'm waiting for the clock to appear. Let me reduce it, that way I can see the clock. All right. It's 8:09:42. Would you like?
Yeah, just run it. Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, so you two are coming out now, correct?
Yes, sir.
After dinner, okay? Go ahead. Okay, if you can stop it here. What does it appear y'all are doing there?
I guess he was looking at it,
At the damage?
at the damage.
Okay, but yet you told us in your deposition, and you told us this morning that you didn't remember doing that, and you didn't look at the damage while at Luby's. Is that incorrect?
Well, I guess I didn't remember, but now I'm remembering a lot of things that he did look at it, and after that happened, he went back inside Luby's to ask the manager there about that video.
Correct. Okay, so this morning in your deposition, when you said you didn't spend any time looking at the car and the damage to the push car, that was incorrect.
Correct.
Okay. Turn the lights up. Thanks. also Sergeant Chavez showed up, did he not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did y'all talk with Sergeant Chavez about what had occurred?
No, sir.
Didn't Sergeant De La Rosa actually point out to him the damage on the vehicle?
Not that I remember. Mr. Curtis. Actually, you know what? I do remember him telling Chavez something, Sergeant Chavez, and Sergeant Chavez was like, "Whoa, what happened?" But that was it. He didn't go into anything.
Okay. You didn't tell Chavez about the accident or how something happened or whatever?
No, because Sergeant Chavez asked me what happened. I just looked at him and I didn't say anything because by that time I already felt I couldn't say anything.
If I could approach a witness.
Sure.
The city provided I don't know that you ever date stamped or marked that picture you gave us the other day on Tuesday. Do you recall this?
Yes, that's part of Hernandez's investigation.
That's admitted already.
What?
I think Joe Hernandez, subheading was already been admitted.
Yeah, Joe Hernandez, that's him.
Oh,
But I want to make it clear that we're not representing that is the fire hydrant.
no.
That's his conclusion about what he thought had happened.
Right. In looking at that picture there, the top photograph that has a police car with a push guard, you see that, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I had asked you before, and I don't know, maybe you're not a car person, but you said you thought the push guard went all the way across the front bumper. Now, clearly that one doesn't. Is that the standard push guard that was on McAllen PD cars or on the one you were driving?
I believe it was.
Okay, and it appears to only cover maybe the middle third of the front bumper, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're telling us that you could hit a fire hydrant without damaging the right front quadrant of that car? In that U-turn?
I don't understand the question.
Well, my question is your testimony that in the U-turn, you caused the damage to the push guard and you did no damage to the right front bumper, fender, any of that area, headlight area to that car?
Yes, sir, that's what happened.
In your initial IDC that you gave on December the 7th, you said you strongly believe that someone may have struck my unit while it was unattended. I guess you're telling us now that's not true. Officer De Leon didn't see any damage at 4:30.
I don't know what Officer De Leon saw or didn't see, because I never spoke to him. I just know he was there.
Is it your testimony that you told Sergeant De La Rosa the truth about doing the U-turn and striking the fire hydrant?
Yes, sir, I told him when that happened. I immediately called him when I got back in my unit.
And why do you believe that I guess you're saying he cooked up the story?
Why do I believe
Yeah.
that? Because like I said, I didn't actually see that there was a dent until minutes later, and when I called him, he said it was too late. I don't know if he felt I couldn't report anything, and he was telling me, well, I know this is what it was. He was telling me, you can't report anything anymore. It's too late. You can't do anything. I have to do something about this.
And you have a duty as an officer to be truthful, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so right then and there, you started down the path of untruthfulness, correct?
Well, I told him the truth.
Well, you didn't tell the department the truth,
Because he told me not to.
and you didn't tell Mario Garcia the truth.
No, sir.
Did he tell you to lie to me also?
No. The only one individual who told me to stick to the story was Sergeant De La Rosa.
Okay, and there was nobody around to help you stand up to what Sergeant De La Rosa was making you do?
I felt like I couldn't say anything anymore.
You couldn't talk to your lawyer, you couldn't talk to internal affairs, you couldn't talk to the chief, and it wasn't until last Friday that you could come clean. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you really think Weslaco is gonna hire you, knowing that you've given false statements under oath?
There's a purpose for everything. Me coming here and telling my side of the story is to come clean about everything, and whether I get the position or I don't, it's all in God's hands.
And do you honestly believe that any defense lawyer in a criminal case that you would testify in as a police officer wouldn't be asking you about perjury?
Objection, this is just threatening the witness.
It's not threatening her.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
One of the important duties of a police officer when they make a case is to testify in court, correct?
Correct.
And you testify under oath in court, do you not?
Correct.
And do you really think that you can go to Weslaco or anywhere else and be able to be a fruitful witness knowing that you've given untrue statements under oath?
I believe I can. I learned from my mistake, obviously the hard way, and hopefully they'll see. Whoever else will consider me, hopefully one day will see that.
I don't have anything else. I'll pass the witness.
All right, ready to act?
So in connection with this video here, Ms. Castaneda, when you drove up to Luby's here, you had already made phone contact with Sergeant De La Rosa?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you had already told him about the damage that you discovered the second time you looked at your vehicle?
Yes, sir.
And is it from here, do you recall if Sergeant De La Rosa called anyone from here?
I really don't know.
Okay. Were you aware if he talked to the manager of the Luby's?
I waited outside while he went inside. He said he was gonna talk to the manager regarding the video.
Okay, what was he, did he tell you what he was going to ask about the video?
think he wanted to see what the video was gonna show as far as whether you would be able to see in the video that he looked at the damage or not, or that we had talked about it, or think of a possibility of a vehicle passing by that may be there. While it was left unattended, someone else struck that unit.
Had you seen this video before today?
No, sir.
It was never shown to you
No, sir.
by OPR or anyone?
No, sir.
And Mr. Curtis asked you some questions about it. There was a point in time when I guess he had interviewed you and talked to you about what happened, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you had never told Mr. Curtis the facts as you are relating them here today.
Correct.
Okay, so when you told him the facts, you had given him the facts that are more aligned with what's in these statements.
Correct.
Okay, but when you met with Mr. Curtis, was he with other people?
Yes, sir.
Who was he with?
Sergeant De La Rosa and Sergeant Garcia.
Did you feel that you could be candid with Mr. Curtis in the presence of Sergeant De La Rosa and Mr. Garcia?
No.
Did you ever have an opportunity to visit with Mr. Curtis by yourself?
I don't remember, but I believe I didn't.
What was your understanding at the time that you met with Mr. Curtis to talk about, what you knew? Was he already representing Mr. De La Rosa?
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't remember.
So what was your understanding about why the Sergeant De La Rosa was present at your interview with Mr. Curtis?
He was part of CLEAT, and that was the union that was representing me.
Okay. And so he was there because Mr. Curtis works with CLEAT and Mr. De La Rosa is associated with CLEAT?
Yes, sir.
Was that your understanding of it?
Yes, sir.
What about Mr. Garcia? Is he also part of that
Yes, sir.
group?
Yes, sir.
Did you feel that you were able to have individual representation, somebody that was watching out for just you?
Well, I believe Mr. Curtis tried doing that, but like I said, when we met, there was other people present.
And you felt that you could not be candid in that context?
Correct.
In connection with the preparation of the IDC, I think that we covered that you hadn't done an IDC on the incident until you were ordered to do so, correct?
Correct.
Okay. By the time you were ordered to do so, had either Sergeant Torres or Lieutenant Lara, had they communicated to you that they had some questions about this incident? About what had happened on December 3rd?
No, not really. Just Sergeant Torres wanted or ordered me to get that IDC to him as soon as possible.
Okay. So there's no, and in this IDC, you indicate that you came on duty on the 3rd, and that one of the first things you did was inspect the unit, correct?
On the IDC, that's what I stated,
Yeah,
yes.
and that part is correct, right? That you inspected the unit at the start of your shift?
Yes, sir.
And there was nothing wrong with the unit then?
Correct.
Okay. So really, in terms of what is missing or wrong about this IDC, it has to do with the part where you go to Luby's, correct? On the end of page 1, where you say, I took several calls and later checked down for lunch at Luby's cafeteria with Sergeant De La Rosa.
Correct.
All right. Did Sergeant De La Rosa help you write this IDC?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you with him when you wrote it, or did he, how is it that he helped you write this IDC? And you can look at it if you want,
I
I
don't
think.
remember.
Did you talk to him about, as you were preparing it, did you talk to him?
Yes, sir.
And was he with you when that was on, or were you talking to him over the phone?
I really don't remember. I don't.
Did anybody else help you draft this IDC? The one that's dated December 7th, 2008?
I believe Sergeant Garcia helped me out with this also. Sergeant Mario Garcia.
Sergeant Mario Garcia? And how did that work? Were you actually writing it out, or were you typing it on the computer, or dictating it, or how did this get
I
drafted?
was I want to say I had started typing this, but what I had already typed was already influenced by what Sergeant De La Rosa had told me to write. And then I asked Sergeant Garcia to help me, because I believe at that time that's when Sergeant De La Rosa took some leave or something. So Sergeant Garcia looked over it, he started helping me type more while I kept telling him more, that he was adding more to it pretty much.
Okay. Had you told him what you're telling us today,
Told
Sergeant Garcia?
what really happened?
Yes, what really happened?
No.
Okay. So how did he, I guess, whose work product is this? Is this your description of the events, or is this yours and Sergeant Garcia's, or yours and Sergeant De La Rosa's? Give us some idea of who helped you put this together.
Sergeant De La Rosa had like a rough draft that I took, because he told me this is what you're gonna have to write down.
And how did you get that?
He handed it to me,
You
or
know-
he had a copy of it on his computer. I don't quite remember.
Okay. And did you
Personal
draw?
computer.
Did you draw from it? Did you use it?
Yes, sir.
And can you say today what part of this IDC of December 7th was taken from the draft that you got from Sergeant De La Rosa?
No, sir. But I want to say that what happened was he emailed me that draft, and I can probably look back and check on my email, and I'll have the rough draft that he came up with.
And where would that email have gone to?
Well,
Your
it's
personal
my
email or a
email.
work email?
My personal email.
Okay. Do you have a personal email?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you believe that you received a draft from him via email?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall if it was a document or an attachment, or was it just the text in the email?
It was just the text in the email. Or it could have been an attachment, I'm not sure.
And is this something that you would have saved?
It's still on my computer.
And do you recall whether it came from him, from the department, or from his personal email? Or
It was his personal email.
Okay, so it wasn't using the departmental email.
No, sir.
This was something that you all did off the department system.
Yes, sir.
And would that have been something that you received from him on or before this December 7th?
I believe so. I can't tell you for sure, but I know
And
I
where
did.
do you keep what personal email do you use?
Yahoo?
Is that something that you can access just on, as long as you have internet access?
Yes, sir.
So if Mr. Osuna here can get on the Yahoo access, you can check your email on
Yes,
a
sir.
break?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you about the second statement that you gave, that's on December 11. Okay, this one is one that you gave in response to an order, correct, by OPR,
Yes, sir.
Office of Professional Responsibility? And tell me the same questions, is this something that you prepared yourself, or did you get help?
I had help with this also, and I don't remember from who, but it was either Sergeant De La Rosa obviously did help me, and I'm not sure if Sergeant Garcia helped me out in this also.
Okay, do you recall receiving any kind of a draft of an email on this one as well?
I don't remember.
Now, when you were asked to give this one, were you surprised to see that OPR wanted information about these prior incidents?
Yes, sir.
Did you know what that was about? Or what had precipitated that interest in
No,
the
sir.
prior? Did you- Is the information that you gave about the prior incidents here in this statement, is this correct? And I'll just
No.
refer you to the bottom of this page where you say, as for the other two incidents mentioned by the chief, I remember the incidents but not all the details. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you go on to describe that you were at Cazadores, that you got a call, and that you hit the dumpster, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you say, I got off the unit to check for damage but did not see any damage. Okay. And what, I mean, you didn't see any damage, but you saw the green paint, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what's missing from this is that there was the collision or the contact with the dumpster was close enough to where green paint rubbed off onto the unit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's missing from here, is it
Yes,
not?
sir.
Okay, did you have any discussion with anyone about whether to say anything about that?
Well, with Sergeant De La Rosa.
Did you have a discussion about whether to omit the reference to the green paint
In this,
in this
Sergeant.
Garrity statement? Yes.
Sergeant De La Rosa was the one that told me we didn't have to mention anything about the paint, since there had been no dent, nothing left in the unit.
Okay, and you accepted that at face value?
Yes, sir.
And then you described the other incident at Spirits, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you say at the bottom, in both these cases, I relied on my supervisors, De La Rosa and Arenas, both very experienced, who determined these incidents did not constitute a, quote, accident because there was no damage, much less injury. Is that correct?
Correct,
Okay, I mean, and that was your position, your belief then, correct? You relied on what they told you?
correct.
And that's your position today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you really don't know anything about why the July incident has become important, do you?
No, sir.
Pass the witness.
Ray Cross?
Just a couple things, sir. Did Officer Julio Barajas take a look at your car after striking the dumpster?
I don't remember, but I don't think so. I spoke to him on the phone only.
Okay, I'm looking at his statement, which is tab 3, bait stamp 28, and I guess this is the second volume.
I'm sorry, which one?
Tab 3, bait stamp 28, this is the second volume of the IDCs and reports and so on, and this is a statement from Officer Barajas dated December the 8th. And it begins this past Saturday, December the 6th, 2008, Sergeant Lucas Torres began a conversation with me about Officer Karina Castaneda having had her first fleet accident. And then it goes on down in that paragraph. Short time later, Officer Castaneda called me by phone and told me that she had backed up her unit into a green trash bin. Do you remember that phone call?
Yes, sir.
She asked me if I could meet her to see the damage. Did you ask him to come look at the damage?
I don't remember that.
Okay. I told her that I would meet her by the parking lot just north of the Stripe store at Bicentennial Hackberry. A short time later, she arrived, and I noticed some green paint on the back right corner of the bumper. I told her to report it as a fleet accident and inform her supervisor. Do you remember any of that?
I don't remember that.
Isn't it true that it appears that Sergeant Lucas Torres was doing some kind of investigation that weekend, right? That would have been Saturday, December the 6th.
And that he was doing an investigation?
Right, you give your IDC on Sunday the 7th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's your tab 2, bait stamp 93, on 12/07/08, I was ordered to submit this report. Previously, you confirmed that Sergeant De La Rosa was out of town that weekend, right? He was in Las Vegas? You mentioned he was in Las Vegas, didn't you?
Well, I knew he was out of town.
Okay. So you were working with Sergeant Mario Garcia on these statements?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is it your testimony that somehow or another Sergeant De La Rosa emailed you a rough draft for you to work off of?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and do you remember meeting with me and Sergeant Garcia at Starbucks on the 11th before you submitted the second statement?
Yes, sir.
Whose computer was that statement on?
That was my computer.
It wasn't Mario Garcia's computer?
Mario Garcia did help me out also, and if, like I said, I can look at my email and I can pull out whether I got an email from Mario Garcia and from Sergeant De La Rosa.
Okay, let's assume you got this email from Sergeant De La Rosa to suggest what to say. Okay, let's assume that's true. didn't you have a decision to make at that point whether to be truthful or not?
Yes, Mr. Curtis.
And what decision did you make?
Mr. Curtis, as I've mentioned before, I felt, even if it was my own judgment, I felt like I couldn't say anything because of what Sergeant De La Rosa had already previously told me. Don't go back on your word. You can't go back. Do you understand? You'll get into much more trouble, and they could even bring criminal charges against you for lying.
Okay, so you're the victim here. You have no responsibility because you were intimidated or just told what to do. Is that your testimony?
No, sir, I take responsibility for my actions. I understand it was poor judgment on my behalf to go along with him, but ultimately he was my superior.
Okay. And when the opportunity presented itself at 6:30 on Friday evening to do a quid pro quo with the chief, you did it, didn't you? I'm gonna give the statement you want so you can give me a good reference. Isn't that what really happened?
When?
Friday.
No, sir. Definitely. I mean, as I've said, this was my decision. I didn't speak to anybody. It was something I had to do, or I felt I had to do. It's so sad that I waited so many months to come forward with the truth, but this is the truth, and there's no more to it.
Okay, so you could make a decision Friday afternoon and Friday evening, but you couldn't make a decision back the first of the year.
Correct.
That's all I have.
Redirect.
No further questions at this time. I would like to keep her under subpoena.
All right, you'll be excused as a witness, but the parties have requested that you still be under subpoena. So we'll need you to be available in the event that we have to call you back either today or tomorrow. So, can we get you got a cell phone?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll leave that with the attorneys for the city. All right, you'll be excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Time is it?
2:20.
2:20?
2:20.
Let's take 10. Who's your, off the record, who's your next witness?